You remember that nerdy kid, the one in middle school who spent a lot of time on the internet and dressed up in weird costumes? And sure, all that time on the internet and computers netted me a good job, but it wasn't my passion. That passion? Photography. And it turns out that photography was something that was already in my blood. So if you like cameras, film, chemistry, history, adventure, and a little bit of exploration, then I think we're going to get along just fine. Hey there friends, welcome back to the channel. My name's Alex Laux and today I have a camera review for you. Yes, I never thought I would get to review a Miranda camera on my blog or on this channel, but thanks to my good friend Jim Gray, he sent me a wonderful gift. A Miranda Sensorex with a 50mm f1.8 lens, and I've since been building up a small system for this camera so I can give it a full review for you. So, like always, we're going to send you back to the studio. I'm going to go over the background, give you my impressions of the camera, brief functionality tour, and I'll meet you back here in a few. The Miranda Camera Company was founded as the Orion Precision Products Company in either 1946 or 1947. It depends on who you ask, by Ogihara Akira. Ogihara was soon joined by his former research partner, Osuku Shintaro. The pair had previously worked together on Japanese pulse jet technology during the Second World War. The first product produced by Orion was simply known as the coupler. Its purpose was allowing the Nikon or Contax rangefinder lenses to be able to mount on LTM-based cameras. The pair continued to produce various accessories for the camera market, all while working towards producing a camera of their own. The first prototype, simply known as Phoenix, was first introduced in 1954 and was able to drum up enough investment capital to move it into production. Introduced in 1955 as the Miranda T, it was an SLR with an interchangeable prism finder as well as an M44 lens mount for interchangeable lenses. Orion soon changed their name simply to the Miranda Camera Company in 1958. The company continued to improve on their SLR models, with the Miranda A adding a traditional lever-style film advance, and the Miranda B adding an instant return mirror. The Automex was introduced in 1960. It added metering with an external selenium cell, along with a new bayonet mount for the lens. Further improvements resulted in the Automex II and the Miranda F in 1963, as well as the addition of in-house optics production. A powered CDS cell was added onto the Automex III. In 1966, Miranda introduced the Sensorex. The biggest change was moving the metering cell into the camera body so that it allowed for full open aperture TTL metering using a matched needle system. The meter would also work without the prism finder. There were plans to have a motor drive for the Sensorex, so it featured a removable film door, but that accessory never materialized. Production continued until 1971 when the Sensorex II hit the market. But by this point, the writing really was on the wall. Miranda suffered from poor quality, and despite trying to modernize through the mid-70s with the RE2 and the DX3 model cameras, the new lens mounts both flopped on this already saturated market, and Miranda went bankrupt and operations shut down by 1978. But you know what? The Sensorex is still a pretty cool camera, so let's take a closer look. Okay, so here is the Miranda Sensorex. This is a really cool looking camera. The first thing you're going to notice when you look at it is this front grille. It looks like something off of a Chrysler or a similar car from the 1950s, 1960s than it does on a camera. And I think that is the one thing that I can truly say about the Miranda is that the look and feel of the camera, despite being produced in the 1960s, does have a very 1950s aesthetic to the whole thing. This camera is heavy, it's all metal, You really want a good strap. I have just a simple one that I took this one off of a Canon, so at least it's still a Japanese company on it. There is a rugged elegance to this camera. The first time I learned about these was from my good friend John Meadows on a CCR episode, and he showed me a few photos of the camera, and I was immediately drawn to the look of the camera. I never actually thought I would get a chance to actually hold one in my hand and actually use it. But yeah, no, it is a really cool looking camera. It definitely stands out in the crowd. There's a few interesting little niggly things that we in a modern era take for granted on our SLRs. And yeah, no, it's just a really fun looking camera. Again, it has this scalloped on the lens barrel. It's a really odd duck of a camera for look and feel and functionality. I really enjoy this, and even though I know eventually this thing is going to kick the bucket, I'm definitely going to keep it around. Because it'll just look good with the rest of my shelf queens, and it'll be the first non-family camera to get that sort of promotion, if you might even call it that. But yeah, enough about me babbling about the camera. Let's take a closer look at its functionality. All right, so here we have the Miranda Sensorex in all its glory. You get a nice shot of that front grille. So what do you have on the camera? Well, interestingly enough, the shutter release is right here on the front. And I think the reason they put it here and not more of a traditional spot up on the top plate is because this camera can be used with various waist level finders. You also have your lens, and here is the aperture set lever, and you have a scale both at the top, but you also have a secondary scale down at the side here. The one thing you're going to notice is that right up here at the front, this little dial here, this actually allows you to set what the maximum aperture the lens you have mounted is. So in this case, I have it set to 1.9. So that tells me that this is an older body, well as the lens is a 1.8, so the lens is slightly newer. So I just set this to 1.9. That little tiny amount doesn't really matter in the long run, especially if you're shooting on black and white film. You can really play into that latitude that you get with your black and white film. So you have up here on your top plate, one of the things I really like about this camera is right here you have an on-off switch. So it actually preserves that battery. So just leave it off. Here's your film rewind. You got your frame counter here. And here is your film advance lever. It's all metal. Nothing weird about it. No comfort here. And then this little thing, once you have the lens cocked, it will give you that the shutter is cocked indicator. You have your shutter speed dial. You got speeds from 1 second to 1/1000th plus bulb, and then you have your film speed selector, and you just pull up the collar and then you rotate it, and it has a really nice smooth interface there. On the back, this is your this is where the battery goes. It takes a 6-volt mercury cell, which is truly unfortunate because it would be great to be able to find something similar in the modern silver oxide sphere, but I've heard that this camera doesn't like mercury. Like other ones, you can have somewhat of a bit of a play, but not so much in this case. And then right here, this is your a flash sync port. There is no hot shoe on this particular camera, which is unfortunate, but you got your standard PC socket here. You have your film door, so you first have to press in the safety button and then lift up the lever. And then it opens up. You got your cloth shutter curtain. Pretty standard internal arrangement. You just have to remember to close the latch after you've loaded it, or this thing will flop open. On the bottom, you got your standard tripod socket, and that's your rewind release. Okay, so like I mentioned, this camera has the ability to shoot with multiple viewfinders. So that's what this safety lever is. You simply push it to the side, and then the entire top slides out. And then you can still see in here your metering, and there's your screen. Now you can use it like this, but the manual states that you really want that finder on here because the CDS cell is located behind the mirror. So by having this off, it might throw off the metering meter reading. So yeah, and then this just slides back on, and you're good to go. So for changing the lenses, the first thing you want to do is set the aperture to wide open, and then the actual button to release it is here, and you twist the lens and pull it off. And then you take your second lens that you're going to mount, you set it to 2.8, you align the red dot, and then you make sure that the indexing arm is directly connected to the index aperture on your camera body, and then again you make sure you set that indexing wheel to 2.8 for this 25mm lens. Okay, loading film is straightforward. If you know how to load any camera of the 50s or 60s, there's no real difference in this. So you know what, enough chitter chatter, let's head back to the field and I can talk a bit about the experiences while we shoot the camera. All right, so today I'm here in historic downtown Oakville. I have the Miranda Sensorex loaded with Rollei RPX 100. I have the 25mm f2.8 lens mounted on it with a yellow filter, and I'm going to be developing it in Adox FX-39 II. So let's get walking, and I'll tell you a little bit about my experiences using the Sensorex. All right, let's go. There is a certain raw elegance to working with the Sensorex. I can see why those who use them like them, and why those who don't. These aren't like your normal SLRs, and a lot of things that I take for granted are simply not present on the camera. There's no display inside the viewfinder other than the match needle, which is big and bold, but there's no other way to read the shutter speed or aperture. But the viewfinder is big, and even without having a split prism, focusing is easy. It took me a bit to get comfortable on where to place my hand on the right side so I could easily operate both the shutter release and the film advance. The designers did have to make some concessions to make the camera usable with both an eye level and a waist level finder. The plus side is that with the metering cell inside the camera body, you get full TTL metering with both style of finders. And despite its age, the meter is still quite accurate. The manual does not recommend operations without a finder, as it could easily throw off that meter reading. But after a bit, I did get the hang of it, and as I said, they're the raw elegance. Everything works, the shutter is smooth and has a great sound when released, but not too heavy. The film advance is short and even, and with an all-metal piece, it's not hard on your hands, unless it's the winter. The one thing I do have issue is that the aperture control has no click stops, so it's hard to know if you've stopped it at the right point. The camera is fun to use. It brings you back to a simpler time when cameras were simply there to take pictures. There's no help, there's no safety net. The camera will simply work. And you know what? It won't be something I'd use every day, but it's a lot of fun to use when I do take it out. All right, so that's the first 25 frame shot. I think this is a great point to send you back to the studio to talk about the optics for the Miranda Sensorex system while I shoot off the rest of the roll with my 135mm lens. And hopefully you can see why I think that the optics are actually better than the camera when it comes to the Miranda. And I'll see you back at the park where we started. Okay, so the one thing that I really like about the Miranda Sensorex is the optics. It definitely shows that Miranda put more effort into their lenses than they did into their camera bodies at this point. The one thing you note is that there are many different types of Miranda lenses out there. The oldest are the M44 screw mounts, and there is an adapter for the Sensorex that will allow you to mount the M44 lenses onto the Sensorex body. The one thing you need to note is that there will be no metering at that point. If you do go with a bayonet lens, you're going to want to make sure that it is the right type of bayonet lens for it. When Miranda introduced the later model cameras, they updated the lens mount to eliminate that control linkage. It's similar to what the rabbit ears did on the Auto Nikkor or the pre-AI lenses, that it required a direct physical link between the camera lens and the camera body. So when you are looking at buying these lenses, that's what you're going to have to make sure that they have. And in my searching for these lenses, it took a while to find the right model lenses to use with the camera. And that's another big problem, is that finding these lenses on the used market is incredibly difficult. It took me several months before I was able to even find the wide angle lens and the short telephoto that I wanted. And they're okay, and unfortunately some of the nicer lenses are a bit more pricey, and the main reason is that, yeah, people do adapt them for mirrorless. Now, other options could involve buying Tamron lenses, especially their Adaptol mount, and those work really well with the Sensorex, and also Solagor produced a series of lenses that work well with the Miranda Sensorex. So first up is the Auto Miranda 25mm f2.8. This is a brilliant wide angle lens, and now 25mm might seem a bit odd for most people, but after talking with Joan from Burlington Camera about it, she mentioned that a lot of European brands went with 25mm instead of 24. And given the overall design of the camera, it kind of makes sense. This is an 8-element lens with very little distortion, incredibly sharp image quality, and wonderful contrast. This one is great for urban and landscape work, and I'm glad I got the 25mm instead of the 28. Having that f2.8 helps in low light conditions, and being able to stop down to f16 helps maximize your depth of field. While I wouldn't necessarily use it for portraits, it would be great for group photography when you have limited space. So next up is the lens that actually came with the camera, and that's a 50mm f1.8. Now this is a later version of the lens, as there are older ones that are rated at f1.9. This is also the lens that caught my attention. The results from this lens blew me away. This is a 6-element in 4 groups using a double Gauss planar construction. And apparently you can get a swirl rendering in your out of focus elements if you're shooting it wide open at f1.8. But the images you get out of this lens is sharp. I'm amazed at how well this lens rendered and how sharp my images are. It makes for a good catch-all lens for portraits and low light work, and decent for close focus applications also. It's your average 50, but apparently the real winner from Miranda is their f1.4 50mm lens, which has a 7-element construction, but you do have to pay a bit more for it. And my final lens to round out this kit is the 135mm f3.5. This is a simple short telephoto lens with a small 4-element construction. But don't let that stop you. This lens still produces pretty decent images when you start to stop it down. This is a great little lens and is relatively budget friendly. Now, mine does have some problem with it. There's a bit of separation in the front element that has left a weird flower-like pattern on it. It's definitely not fungus because, again, I got this from Burlington Camera and it cost me a grand total of 25 Canadian dollars. And probably because of that weird thing, Joan would never sell me something with that it was infected by fungus. But you know what? For what the lens is, it is not that bad. Again, you get decent results out of it when you stop it down. Great for portrait work or street photography work. Yeah, I'm not really a fan of the 135mm, but compared to some of the other focal lengths available, like the 85 or the 105, they cost far more on the used market. So I really didn't want to spend that much money on a camera that could potentially die. But the 135 is a great in-between look if you're looking for just your basic 3-lens kit, and I'm glad I was able to get it for the Miranda. Okay, so that wraps it up for this review. The Miranda is an interesting camera, and I'm really glad I had a chance to review it, get some additional optics, and really figure it out. I like unique cameras with interesting histories, and the Miranda Sensorex certainly ticks all those boxes. The biggest problem is that the camera itself is a ticking time bomb. Eventually the battery will die and I won't be able to find an adequate replacement for it. Modern clone cells for the Mercuries aren't that good. Thankfully there is an on-off switch, so I can preserve the battery for as long as possible. The second biggest issue is that mechanically the camera will probably fail at some point. And that's the biggest problems with Mirandas as a whole. They don't exactly have a stellar reputation as well-made cameras, but it might give me an opportunity to try my hand at doing a bit of camera repair to see if I can resurrect it again. But let me know in the comments, what are your experiences with the Mirandas? I know they aren't very reliant, but they can be such fun to use. Also, throughout 2025, I'm collecting questions about me, my life, my photography, generally anything. So leave that in the comments, also using the hashtag AskALP. And if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing, hitting that bell notification icon so that you know whenever I post new content. And as always, shoot what you love with what you love on what you love. Don't give in to the hype.